we're talking about something that affects us all, but for some reason, none of us really want to talk about it, or dare I say, even admit to it. And it's being completely overwhelmed. It happens all the time, even to me. The person that loves systems and processes, I feel like I've got it together, but there are still times that I become completely overwhelmed. So, I'm going to talk about some strategies, some tips that I use to quickly get myself out of that overwhelmed state and back to being productive. Now, if you are somebody who is overwhelmed, that might look like procrastination to you. It might look like a huge task that really isn't that huge, but because you've been festering about it, being overwhelmed by it, it is now this massive thing that has completely started to swallow you up. And you might think, oh my gosh, it's so big, I can't do it. So, if that's you, if this has ever happened to you, this is going to be a really good podcast for you to tune into. And I'm excited to share what works for me that might also work for you. One of the things that I talk about in my Get Clear system is getting focused on priorities. So, whether that is what makes you money or what has a firm date deadline, I think those are the top two things that you can use to determine what needs to get done first. And I think a lot of overwhelm stems from way too much to do. You might be like me, just came back from a massive speaking event. There was a lot of buildup. In fact, I told everybody at the event, I feel like this is a wedding. There's so much buildup to it. There's so many things that we do to prep for these massive events. We have the event, you get to the end of your slide deck, and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, that's it. And it's over. It's amazing the amount of prep that goes into these events, not only the memorization, the creating the slide decks, the hair, the makeup, the travel, whatever it might be. There's so much that goes into that. But when you come back, it's just you're completely exhausted, but in the best way possible. And that can lead to overwhelm in other tasks because you've been so laser focused on something that now you've got to switch gears and move to another task. So, using those two things of what has a firm date deadline and what makes you money is a way that kind of snaps me back to reality. So, I remember that there are things that do require a firm date deadline. Like if you don't get your stuff in by a certain time, you've missed out on an opportunity potentially, and you never want to let that happen. Depending on what your destination procrastination is, I will raise my hand and say it's Instagram. I know I've talked about that before, but it is so easy to get sucked into social media, especially first thing in the morning, especially if you're trying to hide from doing a task. So, whatever your destination procrastination is, it could be laundry, it could be cleaning out your closet, it could be doing whatever task that you know you shouldn't be doing right now because you are avoiding doing something else. Whatever that is, you've got to get around it. And I find the easiest way to do that is by making a list. Writing down every single thing that I'm overwhelmed by really gets it out of my brain and onto paper. Now, when I do this exercise, a lot of times there's some things that I didn't even realize that were rattling around in my brain that were probably adding to my overwhelm and stress. But if I wouldn't have written them all down, because those tasks tend to come out when I'm not even thinking, when I'm just brain dumping and writing onto my list, getting all that stuff out of my head makes a huge difference for me because there's so many things that are locked inside my brain that I don't know about. Getting them all down on paper really helps me sort through them, prioritize them, and decide which ones need to be done first and which ones can maybe be put into later on in the week. Now, this brings me to the next thing. Whether you are a sticky note person or however you like to organize your tasks, for me, it's getting out my paper planner and sticking all those tasks that I wrote on my major brain dump list on to sticky notes. Now, not everything that's on that list is going to get done this week, but that's the benefits of a sticky note. Because when I write those tasks on the sticky note and put them on the days that I think that I'm going to be able to get them accomplished, allows me to move them to the following week if I don't have time. But the goal is to get everything accomplished so that way it's out of my brain. It's not creating stress or anything else weighing me down. I want to make sure that I get it done, get it off my list so I can move on. Another thing is also email. You can get stuck in this email rat race and vice versa. If email is something that you are procrastinating, it can be very easy to just let that inbox build and build and build, again, creating this giant monster that you can't get out of. I find the easiest way to tackle email when you look in your inbox and you're like, holy cow, there's so many emails, is simply going through and trashing things. It's a very gratifying feeling to be able to dump stuff into the trash. But I do have a previous episode where I talk about how I organize my email, which makes it so much easier. So, doing that initial sort and going through, deleting, making sure things are in the subfolders where they need to be can be a really easy way for me to get past that overwhelm because I know, listen, you're just going to jump into your email and delete some stuff. That's pretty easy. It takes the pressure of actually responding to emails when I know I'm just going to get to jump in and delete them. But here's the best part, and this is the same for any task, is once you get started, a lot of times your brain shifts and is like, oh, okay, this is not as scary as I thought it was. I'm just going to keep going. I think something that is equally important is making sure that you have a space that your brain knows when you sit down at your desk, this is time to work. Whatever that work might look like for you, you know, in this space, this is where I work. Creating that work zone or workspace and making sure that it's free of clutter will help your overwhelmed brain know that we're about to get to work. We have everything set up. We have our favorite pens, we have our favorite sticky notes. We've turned our off all the distractions. So that means by putting all your devices on airplane mode or turning them off, better yet, so you can focus. Now, when I've got a big project, something massive that's coming, I like to break down that project into smaller steps. So I mentioned putting those tasks on sticky notes. That's something that I do for projects as well. But if you're familiar at all with the Pomodoro method, so basically that is 20-minute chunks of work and then having a break. I use that break to stand up, take a stretch, walk around, go refill my water, whatever it might be. Using those 20-minute chunks of work time has made a huge change in my business. I actually have a couple different timers. I have one that I've talked about before that has 5, 10, 15, 20, 30-minute blocks. You flip the timer to that side and it keeps track of everything for you. So you're not distracted by your phone, setting a timer, and then you get distracted by Instagram or an email or whatever the case may be. Using those standalone devices has made a really big impact for me because it's taken me away from my device distractions. Another thing that can really lead to overwhelm is your perfectionism. I know that that's something that I've struggled with, but you have to remember that done is better than perfect. Being able to move those sticky notes to the done section of my Kanban board has been life changing. And it's actually really exciting because you feel like you've accomplished so much. So when I look at the bottom of my Kanban board and I see all those sticky notes that are moved down to the bottom, it makes me excited to continue to do more. Being able to plan some of these things in advance really has helped me get out of overwhelm and take these big, scary things that have really been created in my mind, breaking them down and making sure that they get done in a timely manner has really helped move my business forward, reduce my stress, and overall improved my life. I hope these tips will do the same for you.